everyone. Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, presented by Zwift for the Gent-Wevelgem double recap men and women's editions. We have 260 kilometers on offer for the men's race in, I don't know how cold it was, but it was classics conditions. There was a little bit of wind, but it was no 2015 conditions, but it was also no sunny E3. So bit of a day for the hard men today for riders like Pedersen. The parkour is 160 Ks of flat pretty much as they go around De Muren, which you might have seen in the other race, Broe de Panne, this week. And they go through some of the World War I memorial sites. And then they start the hills, which are a collection of the Scherpenberg, Banneberg, and the Kemmelberg, although they do it, and the Monteberg, sorry, and they do the Kemmelberg from a different side, the last edition. That's the steepest one. The last edition of it is 700 meters at 10.4% with some really steep pinches. So it's then flat and a lot of headwind to the finish. It's the sprinters get a chance here in theory. They haven't for a few years. But yeah, good stylist Benji, just missing MVDP and Pog, but every other top like classics rider is here.
Exactly, the big guns are here. Wout van Aert is here, so that's one of the big three that we saw at E3 Heidelberg. But we also don't have Pogacar and Van der Poel because those teams are focusing on Akkerman and on Philipsen. Akkerman because Milano was hit by a car recently, and Philipsen because Van der Poel is not here, because I just mentioned that. Anyway, so we're starting this race, and we know the Muren. Is there going to be wind? But yesterday I checked the predictions, and there was like 5 knots of wind. I don't know what knots are, but it doesn't sound much. So I wasn't expecting much in the Muren, and that's unfortunately what happened, because on one end, you're hoping that the Muren absolutely explodes the race, but on the other end, you don't want that because it's not on the broadcast. So it's like, it's a really annoying balance, no?
Yeah, like that's what happened in previous editions, like 2015, I think. You just see, even in 2020 maybe, I can't remember exactly, you just TV coverage starts and you have a group one of like 12 riders and you're like, oh, well, how did this happen? And then you often have a good race afterwards, but you miss sort of what happened initially. But 260 Ks, it's a long old race. And to be honest, there was no need to televise this today. Like, it was, from what we could see, pretty chill. Big break, 14 riders, notably Ternesen in it for Intermarché. I was a little bit surprised. Like, if you go on the early break, you're not really, especially in Gent-Wevelgem, maybe it's different in Roubaix, but in Gent-Wevelgem, he's not really betting on himself for the final, Ternesen.
I agree. There were some opportunities where they tried to put other riders in the breakaway initially. I think Taco van der Hoorn was one of the riders that tried to go in the break. That's the name you more expect in the break, right? And it was kind of a break that existed in 2 waves. First, the group was at the front and Intermarché didn't have anyone in it. So I think they just panicked and wanted someone in the break, and that's how Ternesen ended up there instead of, for example, a Taco who I tried before. But some other notable riders in there, Van Avermaet, who dropped on the Hotond climb, if my memory serves me right, in E3, so is not that great coming back from an illness. So that's probably why he's in the break. I don't think he was looking forward to today with the weather, if I recall his morning interview. Fedorov, U23 world champion, Yellow Allies in here. Surprised he's still in the peloton, no offense, I just genuinely thought he retired. Louis Aski for Groupama, Johan Jacobs, Biermans, and so forth. The expected breakaway riders like Topsport Vlaanderen and Bingual. I'm getting it over, like the virus of calling it Bingual, I'm getting it as well. But this breakaway, some riders would make it into a further stage of the race as a consequence, but you might as well just forget about them right now. Well, Filippo Ganna, let's talk about him for a second, had a crash early on in the stage, was holding his knee. Like, how can I perfectly express this obviously I care a lot about him, and it looks from Ineos afterwards, after the stage, that it's not that bad what he has, but it reminded me the way that he was sitting there of that Peter Griffin meme of Family Guy, where he's like holding his knee and like rocking back and forth. That's how it looked like. So it wasn't good, and he DNF'd. He's not in the race at this point. And then we went to the Muren, and what happened in the Muren, my friend?
Nothing happened in the Muren. The wind obviously wasn't strong enough. It was obviously like, if it's cool and rainy, they're burning a few more calories regardless, but The breaks kept in reasonable order on like 3 minutes most of the time. And it's really, even the Scherpenberg, that's shallow, and the Barneberg, nothing happens. Jumbo then assemble and push Van Hooijdonk forward. And it's on the first Kemmelberg where he just ups the pace, not like a huge attack. Laporte's Jumbo then dot their riders progressively through the group. So they'll have like Van Hooijdonk at the front, 10 wheels back Laporte, another 10 back is Van Aert, another 10 back is Kooi. And yeah, that group gets a decent split. Turner's here in good shape. He goes with them and they go on with it. So a pretty nice move, especially with Mohoric. This is exactly the move Mohoric tries to get in every time. Like he has to get ahead. And Florian Vermeersch for Lotto, he's having a really good classic season. So nice move. And then others were bridging Benji.
Exactly. Now, I do want to note for a second, who's not in this first move once again? Quickstep. In the same way that they missed the early splits in Omloop, they're once again not in this split of these 4 riders. I would expect a Lampaert and Asgreen and a Seneschal to make their way into this move because despite having Merlier and Jacobsen, you want to neutralize these grooves by being in them instead of having to ride behind them. And that does not happen if you're not in those moves. Then you have to ride behind them. But then a second group forms behind, which is after that Kemmelberg 1, which is Krol Andersen, Rizal, a dude from X. Then we have Turgi and Laporte. So these riders also trying to bridge up. And once again, no quick-step rider. And I'm like, the fuck, guys? Like, what do you expect to do in this race? Are you just going to stay back and stay with your sprinter chasing every move all day? Like, that's not going to work, eh? And this move does eventually come to the front. And then we see 2 more moves from the peloton. Mes Pedersen, who tries to bridge and it works. He bridges completely. And we've got Fabio Jacobsen and what did we call it again? A potato chase?
Yeah.
In French?
Like, okay, I got some thoughts. And listen, this is where we're going to have the discussion because this is where the race really, things happened.
Yeah.
The rest of the race was not too much to analyze, frankly. This is where, first of all, I agree with you on Quickstep. You could put Asgreen, Lampaert, and they should be good enough. On first, Kemmelberg, Lampaert or Asgreen should be good enough, or Seneschal to make a move with Mohoric and Van Hooijdonk. I'm not saying Van Hooijdonk's not in really good shape. He made a group of 6 in E3, but he's not Wout van Aert. Like, he just upped the tempo. It was positioning and a choice. Same with Mohoric. And Turner's just come back from injury. They should be good enough to make that move. Because you can say, oh, well, they can bring it back. They can. Yep. But if you chase after first Kemmel, and in that zone for, 25, 30 kilometers before next Kemmel, you will have no domestiques left to chase after the last Kemmelberg, even if the gap is small. You will have burnt them all. And then they made it even harder for themselves by bridging Jacobsen across. Okay, say Jacobsen gets across. One of two, you think in theory he's going to neutralize the group. He won't because everyone knows they can drop him. It's not like Pedersen. And that's where it didn't work for Pedersen. Yep. Pedersen bridges across, burns that match. Van Hooijdonk and Laporte just stop pretty much. And so that group gets melted, even though Quickstep had let the gap out to 130 because Jacobsen was in a chasse patate. So Jumbo literally just had 2 in front. They had Laporte and Van Hooijdonk, Van Aert and Kooi behind, and they just weren't having to do anything in this phase.
Exactly. And when you're Quickstep, 1, don't set 2 sprinters to this race. You're taking away 1 domestique that you will dearly need to catch all the attacks that happen if you have Merlier in your squad. Merlier should be the leader here going into this race. Jacobsen should not be on the start list. Number 2, I would argue that... what the hell was I going to say? I've got no clue what I was just about to say. But I completely agree with your point that they bottled themselves completely by going early in these moves. By not going early in these moves, by not being with Van Hooijdonk, by not being with Laporte, and they forced themselves to chase in that zone during the plug streets and so forth. You see Asgreen on the front, you see Seneschal on the front, and these are the riders, like you said, that they need after that Kemmelberg, because let's say they close it, and they are closing it at the moment. It's getting close with half a minute. It's 20 seconds. It's 15 seconds going towards the next hill zone after the plug streets. And I'm thinking to myself, well, they're going to have spent all their domestiques. We're going to arrive at this climb, and while Van Hooydonk and Laporte might be caught, what do you think Wout van Aert is here to do? Is he going to sit back and is he going to lead out? Is he going to lead out Koe at the end? Is that his goal today? No, eh? We know something else is coming. And meanwhile, I do want to mention a rider that did something great today, as in a great performance, and that is Florian Vermeer. He on the plug street, so in the middle of the two hill zones, he had his back derailleur that was broken, and the way he held his bike up, legendary. It was like he was swinging left and right on his bike. It's the one he didn't hit anybody. He jumps off his bike, switches to a Shimano bike, so he drops from the group ahead because he was in there with Van Hooydonk and so forth to the peloton with his Shimano bike. Then he changes to his Lotto bike again, behind the peloton. Then he comes back to the peloton, and then we arrive at the Kemmelberg. So we're getting far already with Florian Vermeer. Such an effort, and he's still there. And then he's still at the front of the group going into the second Kemmelberg, which is a really strong performance, I did want to note. Meanwhile, Jacobsen is dropped from the peloton as well after his Schalspetat. So yeah, let's talk second Kemmel.
Well, yeah, that group is brought back. Alpecin had been represented ahead, and you'll know that MVDP is on Zwift after his Milano Sanremo victory last weekend on Saturday. He did his recovery ride, I think, the next day on Zwift. And if you want to hop onto Zwift, the easiest way to start is here, the Zwift Hub. Unbox, unlock virtual worlds, and crush your fitness goals from $4.99, the best priced turbo trainer on the market. You can no sweat setup delivered straight to your door. Get Zwifting in no time with full immersion, direct drive feel. So thanks to Zwift for supporting the show. And also, Alpecin had, I think, better tactics today. Like, they did have SK ahead, but yeah, it comes back that move. Van Aert's not really had to do anything. And I thought when, like, in theory, when Pedersen goes across, I was like, oh, that's kind of a bit of a mistake from Van Aert. Like,
yeah, 100%.
That's probably one guy you should be marking. But in the end, Pedersen's bridged for nothing. He's done an effort to get across. He's working with that group, and then he just come back before second Kemmel anyway. And he kind of had to do it, because if he doesn't, the group might go away. I don't know. Ideally, Trek should have, who do they have on this start? Yeah, Sturven or someone in that move.
Exactly. Stuyven should be the one that makes that move, not Pedersen at this point in the race. Just like last year, I recall Pedersen being in the early move again in Gent-Wevelgem, and then in the end, Stuyven was their last man in the final attack, who shouldn't have been pacing in that final attack. But hey, we can't go back to the analysis of last year. But this year, I agree, Stuyven is the guy that should be in those moves. Pedersen should not be the one bridging, but maybe Stuyven is not in the best form the way he has looked the last few weeks, in my opinion. Now, we get to that second Kemmel, we mentioned it, and the group gets caught before the bottom. So Quickstep did close it, but they spend all their riders. So it's a decision they made, but is it the right one? We'll see, eh? We see Vermeer at the front, like I mentioned. We see Ewan in very good position going into the bottom, but the first two riders hammering it at the bottom. There was one rider that attacked before the bottom. I think Turgis did. And then two Jumbo riders make a move. It's Laporte and it's Van Aert. Van Aert in first and Laporte in his wheel. And they bridge towards Turgis. And there's no one that can follow. Kind of gets close. Following is the one that I low-key said on the podcast, the preview of Gent-Wevelgem. There's no way he's following anyone. He's getting dropped on every hill. Caleb Ewan. Jesus Christ.
He had one effort in him today. He had one big effort into him in the second Kemmel. I thought he was going to get there. I was like, holy, he's flying. And then Kemmel keeps going a bit, keeps going. It's not ended. And Van Aert's just dragging Laporte away. They were doing like a TT style on Kemmel, and Pedersen subsumes Ewan. Those two, Laporte and Wout van Aert, go over the top. It's a very narrow, wet descent with a hairpin right-hander, which slows down the group too. The gap does open up to, it is well over 5 seconds, but it's not more than 10. I didn't stopwatch it. The group's not that far behind. And the group is not like in ones and twos. There's multiple riders from multiple teams. There's two Bahrain, Moritz and Wright. There is Pedersen. There is Vermeer and Ewan, at least two from Lotto. there's Ineos, I think, with Turner maybe, or Narvaez or Sheffield. Maybe they're a little bit further back. But there were teams with multiple riders. But this is so Moritz is really good at anticipating, but he is a big contributor to Group 2 syndrome and often will initiate the death spiral. And so you think if these guys, we're talking 50 kilometers to go, and it's still a large group behind. I don't care how strong Van Aert and Laporte are. If the group behind really gets their act together, maybe they can at least close it before last Kemmel and then see what happens. But Moritz immediately attacks the group on the descent. Yeah. And Pedersen has to do a big effort to close him. And then suddenly at 10 seconds is 20. Yeah. And then Wright's not pulling and it's just a mess. But we see this. This keeps happening. Like, I wasn't surprised, but maybe Lotto could have got back. I don't know. Just seeing Jumbo go up the road, unless you're Van der Poel or Pogacar, like, you're already, I think, thinking of second place, third place.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I'll be honest, the second that we got over that camel and the gap was up to 25, 30 seconds, I was like, this race is over. I saw no situation where that second group came back the way they had ridden in that descent and the way I would expect them to ride, knowing that Quickstep blew all their domestiques.
Exactly.
But Meersch is the only domestique that Ewan has where he's had to spend his soul out knowing he came back from that mechanical earlier. And for the rest of the riders, there's one domestique of Trek that is actually doing its work, but there's two domestiques working in that group. Two are working. They're never going to close the gap to Wout van Aert and Laporte, who are also working and are better riders.
I think it was Kirsch and either Masiuk or Gradek. So it's like, you see this big group behind, how's the gap going out? But it's like, well, a 2-up time trial between Christophe Laporte, Van Aert, and Kirsch and Masiuk, of course, are going to take time out. And then the gap is a minute, hovers at a minute for a while, and then they have last Kemmel, and we know that the last Kemmel, they're going to just rip it, because the domestiques get dropped on last Kemmel, and then you got to wait for the sprinters. Yeah. Well, so the race was done. The only question mark was what would happen with Jumbo and Van Aert and Laporte. On last Kemmel, Van Aert basically has Laporte dropped. He lets everybody know that he was the strongest. That was clear. Yeah. Clear from second Kemmel, but he waits for Laporte to come back. And yeah, there's not too much to say, really. Jumbo, honestly, cut to the chase. They ride away, and Wout van Aert gifts the win to Christophe Laporte, which after he lost Gent-Wevelgem, I think came second last year. So good win for Jumbo. I mean, people saying, oh, Van Aert should take the win, but it doesn't matter. Like, if he's happy to gift it, he's happy to gift it, I guess.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think it's a good decision to gift it. First of all, Wout van Aert has won Gent-Wevelgem before. It's not like he needs to fill up a gap in his palmarès necessarily. If he hadn't won Gent-Wevelgem before, he might have taken it himself. Now, next to that, last year we had E3 where Wout van Aert took the victory when they were both ahead. So probably both these factors in his mind probably told him, bah, might not be a bad idea to give it. It's not the end of the world that I don't have a second Gent-Wevelgem on my palmarès anyway. And next to that, you got to keep in mind, it's probably Laporte's dream to win one classic in his career. And if that's the case, and if Wout van Aert gives that in such fashion, Laporte was still the second best rider in the race. So he deserves something here, that's for certain. But the factor is, you're basically creating infinite loyalty from this point onwards from Laporte. In every race that comes, he already had a lot of loyalty from the Paris-Nice victory. And this continues onwards with the classics. And now you can expect Laporte to ride his soul out every second he rides for Jumbo-Visma for Wout van Aert. Now, his contract is running out, so let's hope they re-sign him. Otherwise, that loyalty might be very short. But
maybe he moves to another team like Scarponi or whoever it was with Contador. I don't know. Since joining Jumbo, quote unquote, as a, to help Van Aert to bolster the classic support, he'd never won a World Tour race before 2022. He's won a Paris-Nice stage, Tour de France stage, Tour of Denmark GC, Bache Semi-Bache, and now Gent-Wevelgem was second at Gent-Wevelgem. So, I mean, yeah, it's
Pretty good.
I guess it's a message to future signings. Like, even if you join, you're not necessarily going to have to ride for Van Aert every single race. And even if it had all come back, if it hadn't been selected, Van Aert, I reckon, would have let out Olaf Koy today as well. Who, by the way, Koy and Van Hooijdonk, they did help behind. Yep. They really, Van Hooijdonk and Koy were right in the wheel of Kirsch and the Bahrain rider, just letting them know we're right here, we're not pulling. And they were marking counters, and that's what allowed the gap to get to a ridiculous level.
Yeah, for certain. And I would also argue that with Van Hooijdonk, he was also trying to create a situation where Koy should still be able to sprint full third, which is also intriguing to see. But I will also say there's a lot of like criticism towards what Wout van Aert did, like, oh, they should have sprinted for it and so forth. But Wout gets to choose it. With 10 kilometers to go, he apparently, according to Sports, said to Laporte said this, that Wout said with 10K to go, if you want it, you can take the victory. And a lot of people on Twitter were like, oh, a real champion should take the victories. A real champion would win. He doesn't deserve to win RVV and Roubaix after this, but a real champion knows when to reward the domestiques that work their ass off for him, and when to claim a victory to fill out their palmarès when necessary. I feel like that's a good ending to that. I have no issue with what Wout did, and I think it was the right decision, full stop.
It would have been great to see them sprint for it because, frankly, this was an incredibly tedious day of cycling. I spent 6
Laporte
hours.
Would have won.
Well, I mean, if they were racing for it, Wout would have dropped him on last camel. But yeah, in the sprint, who knows? But yeah, I watched 6 hours of cycling to see not a single competitive finish, and Jumbo deciding from the car who would win 2 of them, or on the road. But in the group behind, a counter move of Mikkel Bjerg, who was quite strong. The UAE went with Van Mark and Frison. Pedersen bridged across to it, but spent a lot. Van Hooijdonk missed it, and Sepp Van Mark won the bunch sprint, or not the little group sprint, for third, which is good to see. Big points for Israel, and quite a good result for Van Mark, actually, on Israel. Frison fourth, and Gent-Wevelgem, Pedersen fifth, Bjerg sixth. Renard won the proper bunch sprint for seventh, the young Cofidis rider. Quite talented, of course. Olaf Koy 8th, Van Poppel 9th, Maclay 10th, Ackermann 11th. He had quite a nice race. Merlier was very active, which was curious, like pushing in crosswinds, and then couldn't sprint. So that was weird.
Without domestiques, what can he do?
I think he could have been a little bit more passive.
Okay.
But that's the difference between 14th and 7th or something. So a bit of a horror day for Quickstep. 14th, their best result. Yeah, there's not much to say.
Schmidt, like, get him to the fucking classics. Oh,
like this. You know what Jumbo are going to do in races without MVDP and Polk. Like, they're going to play numbers ahead. You gotta be ready and be with them. Easier said than done, of course. But Ineos. Shame with Gunnar crashing. Turner looked good. He was sort of riding as a domestique for Narvaez. I think he'll be rounding into nice shape for Roubaix in a couple of weeks, so I'm looking forward to seeing how Turner goes there. But I don't really have much else to say from this race. It was a little bit like the interesting phase was from first camel, but then it was very, very tedious.
It was tedious, but at least there was still the doubt of like, would they actually gift Laporte or not? Because after the Trek not gifting from Longo Borghini on Jebel Hafid, I've been traumatized from these moments, and I still doubt every single second who will be gifted or not. But in the end, I think he made the right decision. A nice ending with a nice winner, and it wasn't a very legendary edition of Gent-Wevelgem, and I'll probably forget about it in a few days.
I mean, 260 Ks, cold, wet conditions, rubbish on the roads, MVDP and POG training in Monaco and wherever in the sun. It's a little bit of a risk before Flanders, right? For Van Aert?
Probably, but can you expect it to be rainy a few days before Gent-Wevelgem?
Yeah, probably. Decent chance.
Well, they're riding towards Fort of Vlaanderen, and that could be rainy as well. So maybe that's also a
true.
Risk
they are, and Van Aert's not doing Dwars Tour. I don't think.
Maybe it snows that day and makes it even worse.
Dude, it's sunny, and it was snowing on me. It's nearly April. So what's going on? I couldn't believe it. Anyway, that was men's Gent-Wevelgem. I don't really have much else to say. Jumbo-Visma, sort of unfortunately for us, for the fans, viewers this season, without MVDP and Pog in attendance, it's a little bit of one-way traffic. So get Remco in, get Schmidt in. Let's go. Don't you reckon? He doesn't need to do Catalunya. He's send him to Gent-Wevelgem.
Exactly. I think so as well. RVV would be nice. An early move in RVV.
It's not too
I
late.
would love it. But anyway, let's end it here when it comes to the men's race.
All right, women's edition. Again, we had a strong SD Works team stacked with Reusser, Wiebes for the sprint, as well as Kopecky to basically win in any way she likes. Extremely strong domestiques with Majerus, Cecchini, and Lonica Unica. We have Balsamo as a leader for Trek. Bastianelli hoping for a sprint. She's done well here before. I think she has won this race. She has in 18. For UAE Team ADQ. No Vos for Jumbo-Visma. Anna Henderson would be their leader. Zoe Backstedt, the young phenom on EF. We'd be watching closely how she goes, as well as Nivea Doma on Canyon SRAM with Besoit, who's looking very good as a Belgian talent, and Movistar with Ode Bianic. So I was really hoping to see a showdown between Wiebes and Balsamo. Balsamo actually beat her in the reduced group sprint in Broe de Panne the other day behind. Oh, I didn't mention DSM. Pfeiffer Georgie, of course, with Charlotte Kuhl and Jastrap. So really strong squads. Again, rainy conditions. Coverage started with about 80 Ks to go. The women do two sets of the Camel Hills, basically a collection. So they do Schoenberg, Bunneberg, Monteberg, then Camel, the normal side, and then they do the same, but then the Camelberg from the hard side. So they miss one set of the hills, and it's 163 Ks, 100 Ks less. Still a long race for one of the longer races on the women's calendar, and it's still like 35 Ks from the last Camel to the finish in rainy conditions. So hard race, and we didn't really have a break, Benji, when coverage started. It was just Peloton a block with SD Works, Canyon SRAM, Jumbo all sort of side by side.
Yeah, it happens a lot in women's cycling where we have so many riders that try to go in breakaways, but the peloton speed is just a bit more significant to the point that every break just gets called after 20 kilometers, and we have like 20-kilometer break here, 20-kilometer break there, 20-kilometer break here. And like, I don't care who's at the start in a breakaway of 20 kilometers at this race. That's why I tuned it with 60 Ks to go before the men's race was finished, because the end of the men's race wasn't that intriguing. Anyway, Canyon was spacing the moment that I kicked in, and I found that intriguing. I was like, what are they planning? Because they've got Maaike van der Duin and Bossuyt for a potential sprint, Nivea Doma for a potential punch in the hills, and I would expect Nivea Doma to try something on those hills while they keep the other two for the sprint at the end, because Maaike van der Duin and Bossuyt were pretty damn strong at Brugge de Panne, that's for certain. Now, we're going towards the Camelberg 1, as the Belvedere side, the one I have conquered in my life, and that was devastating that day. That being said, this peloton rode faster than me, that is for certain. It was Nivea Doma that started pacing at the front going into that Camelberg, and she was pushing with Kopecky in the wheel, Henderson in the wheel, and that three-women trio went up the road for a tiny bit, but in the descent it kind of closed down with a few riders coming back. Wiebes was not too far behind there on the Camelberg and joins them with Labecki, with another Canyon rider, with riders in there. So we get this group coming ahead with two Canyon riders, with Wiebes and Kopecky and so forth. And who would you expect someone in there to make a move?
I thought Canyon SRAM, well, first of all, they were way, way stronger than I expected. They had Skalniak Sojka, who's a Polish signing they've brought in, who won 14 races last year on the Conti circuit. She was on a Polish Conti team, I think. She was doing the lead out for Nivea Doma, but then they got numbers into that group with Kopecky on her own. And this is between the camels, so you've got this phase between first camel and Barneberg, Schoenberg, I'm not counting, of 20 Ks, maybe less than 20 Ks, where you can try and get a rider ahead, because if Kopecky launches last camel with Wiebes in the group, big trouble. And you're basically betting everything that Niewiadoma can follow Kopecky and then also beat her in the sprint. So to me, with the 3 in the group, I thought they have to anticipate and get some ahead and force Kopecky to chase or get in. I don't know. Like, this is the opportunity, and they kind of didn't. And Kopecky was pacing a little bit, but I feel like they had an opportunity to move there, and just rolling through or waiting wasn't the option.
Yeah, it seems like everything kind of came together again after that. Group was ahead, and we get this peloton that is moving towards the second part of the hill circuit again, the one more camelback that we do, and we've got a major crash happening in the peloton, and it was a weird one because
terrible.
Yeah, it was a terrible crash. Age insurance rider seems to have had her wheel in the verge of death, or whatever you call it, in the middle of the road, and she like slides to the right and takes out basically half the group. And riders that are involved, honestly, I had no clue who was involved first, because like half the group was down. Weebus was not involved.
Georgie's second crash, or at least second time stopped by a crash, so she had a race affected. DSM, half of them were taken out. Trek were taken out, half their team. I don't think Balsamo was, but I think it might have been Chapman who was shaken up. They had one rider who was really banged up on the ground. Just a huge crash. Riders with broken wrists, I think. It was terrible. High speed. And because it was wet, also, no one could brake from behind. The riders braking from behind just slid out into the group. So that was terrible. That also, with SD Works largely unaffected, with Kopecky, Vibus, Reusser in front, their numerical advantage was even more stark. And we go into the Barneberg ahead, and Reusser just kind of like Van Hooydonk's move on the first Camel. Not like a huge attack, but she doesn't have any other top favorites on her wheel and just starts to push really hard, get separation. You've got Kopecky staring down whoever else is maybe chasing. You've got DSM in disarray because of the crash just before. And so Reusser gets this monster gap on the Barneberg, and you've got Kopecky marking behind. And again, the race was like done. Like strategically, you know that you got the strongest time trial rider in the race ahead because Van Dijk's not here. You've got the strongest all-rounder marking moves behind, and you've got Wiebes also just behind, the fastest sprinters. So there's no domestiques to chase.
Yep. There's no domestiques, both because of the hills, but also I think that crash probably hit this race a lot. I think because half the peloton was decimated in that crash, half the domestiques were gone. And then it's very difficult to have that group come back towards the time trialist that is full stop going for it. But I gotta be honest, we're going into the next phase of the race. Reusser gets over the Camelback, the last Camelback, the so-called harder side. I claim the other side harder because I climbed the other side and I was dead. But that being said, the gap stayed the same on that climb. Even though Brown pushed a tiny bit, he was marking her on that climb. The group kind of thins out again, and we get over that climb, and that's when the tempo is dead in that group. And we see groups come back, and it's a large group that comes back, and we get a peloton of what? 40, 45 people? And when that is the case, with multiple teams with multiple riders, then I'm like, 5 DSs need to be fired here. Because, like, nobody's riding.
Yeah, but it's Wiebes and Kopecky's the threat, I think.
Yeah, but like, if you're not at the front, you can't win the race, huh?
I know, and anything can happen. We saw in the finish. Anything can happen.
Yeah.
Reusser missed 2 bidons. She could have its cold conditions. She could completely hunger flat. She could get into the headwind. I agree. Never give up. I agree, but also it's just like SD Works is so dominant that people already just start thinking second, third, and they don't believe they can bring back Reusser. And it also goes to show how important Ellen Van Dijk not only is for Trek, but for the cohesiveness of the peloton as a whole. Because if she was there, no offense to maybe Van Onroy, who was pacing, or one of the Trek riders, but like the only woman to consistently beat Reusser in TTs has been Ellen Van Dijk, and she's on mat leave. So if maybe she's on the front, drives it back, this is a little bit different. She got Balsam on the group, but she wasn't. And the race is done, except for an errant turn when, like, of course, Brown tried on Kemmelberg. Kopecki's there, stops. But where did Royce take a bad... She went up a side street. She just lost 30 seconds, went the wrong way.
I 100% have no clue what you're talking about because I tuned out the television for like 10 minutes.
Royce, with 4 or 5Ks to go, went just down a ram side street. Just off the course.
Genius. Absolute genius.
They never give up.
That's true. But I will say, however, despite this being a great race for SD Works the way it looks, I feel like they could handle something better in the phase of like 15 to 10 kilometers to go in the group behind. Because we see that plenty of people are making moves. We see the likes of I don't know who's attacking. Henderson was making moves and so forth.
Gannon got in.
Georgie was still attacking after she came back because she rode a hell of a race once again. And when those moves happen, the way I expect SD Works to respond is to neutralize them by closing them down and not by putting Majorus in those moves, because then you're removing the chance of having a 1-2 on this stage. Because at this point in the race, Reusser wins the race, right? So if you're gonna play tactically here, you try and close it down for Wiebes to take it out. And right, the second that I think that, Wiebes is involved in a crash, and that's a nice way of putting it, because she goes around on the left side of the group. She tries to come around, and she basically takes out Kopecky. She takes out Cecchini. Was stopped. I don't think she crashed.
And
Balsamo on the ground as well. So half the group she was in was out of the race at that point, basically.
I mean, Majorus let her go for a top 5 or something, like a loyal domestique for SD Works, because she was in that move with Georgie, Bassoit, Henderson, Buyak, and Barker. But that group, it's joined, as I said, by Roseman Gannon and co, and Yastrab for DSM. They start finessing so much that with DSM having 2 riders in there as well, that Group 3 comes out of nowhere. Riders we've not seen, or maybe it wasn't Group 3. Hold on. I thought that was Charlotte Cool, because we watched and we just started recording. Megan Yastrab was in that group, bridged across. The full group comes back with Bastianelli and Svinkels from Jumbo Visma. And I thought it was Charlotte Cool. Yastrab then cleans them in the sprint. Anyway, that's very impressive. Beating Micah van der Doorn, Svinkels, Christina Schweinberger, who I think had been in a crash, Bastianelli, Eleanor Barker, Coponi, Anna Henderson, Shari Bassoit. So Yastrab is coming good. She is coming good.
Brugge de Panne, really strong as well, combined with Georgie there. And in this race, we know that she had a sprint, and seeing her destroy Van der Duyn and so forth. Van der Duyn also really sprinting well in the last couple of weeks as well. 7th in Brugge de Panne, 3rd in Ronde van Drenthe. And last year she had 2 top 5s and a 6th place in Tour de France Femme. I feel like she's kind of the underrated 2nd, 3rd tier sprinter in the peloton as well.
Yeah. Okay. So one to watch. Yastrab got big things coming. Her Georgie is a really potent classics combination. Georgie had some really bad luck today. She's more the attacker and follower. Maybe if she hadn't crashed earlier, she goes with Reusser. I don't know. But dominant from SD Works. As Benji said, they didn't really try to lock out the podium, but also...
Well, they also crashed.
Well, I mean, you should probably not be too confident, right? Like, what if Reusser flats, crash, and she's still going through wet corners quickly, like, you don't want to just get in the car behind, which they kind of did.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, she didn't. They win easily. And it was kind of a mirror result from both races. Kind of not the best day of racing, frankly.
Jesus, that was boring the last 40k of each race.
Yeah, just dominance from 2 SD Works Dutch too. Or they're Belgian? They're Dutch.
We'll claim they're
Dutch
Belgian
registered.
if they win anyway.
No, they're Dutch. I can see on PCS.
Now we're claiming it.
So yeah, that was that in Gent-Wevelgem. It's a big race, and Laporte and Reusser will be happy to have it on their Palmares. It is. I mean, she won a Tour de France stage last year, Reusser, but she's not won a classic this big. So this is a huge result for her. She looked in very, very good shape, like super athletic rider, and she's still improving as well. So can't wait to see how she goes this year. Probably be the big favorite for world champs TT later in the year. Otherwise, around the traps, we had GP Industria. Ben Healy won that. I mentioned that mainly because he has come into great shape. Third in Settimana, GC, won a stage, now winning GP Industria. Listen, not the best start list, but also he won by 30 seconds solos, so he's in nice shape. He's doing the Giro. Just a little word to the wise for everybody. He will be a big contender for like the Napoli stage that De Gent won from the break. Ben Healy. Wow, my voice cracking. He anyway, just mark him down for those sort of stages. Anything else from today, Benji?
Well, we saw that race. We had Catalonia on the podcast already, so if you haven't seen that, you can check out that podcast as well. It's also online. Well, worth it to mention, as it was the end of Catalonia. But racing wise, that's kind of it, and we're looking forward to the next week. And we're seeing that Dwars door Vlaanderen is our next adventure together, right?
It is on Wednesday. I believe we'll have the Ronde van Vlaanderen preview probably before that, but no promises. Given that, who knows? Yeah, maybe we'll wait for after Dwars door Vlaanderen, because you never know if Pogba and VDP crashes. It makes a big difference. But yeah, other thing I want to note is a British 1-2 in the women's junior Gent-Wevelgem from Izzy Sharp and Kat Ferguson. Just to watch out for those two. Particularly Izzy Sharp looks very, very good, and so does Kat Ferguson. Hold on. She's 16. She won Trofeo, baby Trofeo of Feta Binder.
Yeah.
Okay, she'll be on a World Tour team soon. Kat Ferguson and Izzy Sharp. All right, so they're just names to look out for, to pencil down. But I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and what's been a big block of racing. We're going to have a couple of days off. We think we deserve them. Maybe we don't. And we'll be on Zwift, I think, in the next couple of days, catching up. But I hope you enjoyed all the pods, and we'll see you with some more classics action this week. Until then.